Johnny Carson, a bright, charismatic host, ruled late-night TV for decades. After leaving the spotlight, something unexpected happened. He vanished. Silence, no interviews, no public appearances. We unearth the quiet mystery of Johnny Carson's final years and why one of television's brightest icons left. Early life and character. On October 23, 1925, in Corning, Iowa, a small Midwest town, Johnny Carson was born. He was Homer and Ruth Carson's second of 3 children. His father worked for a power business, thus the family moved often when Johnny was little. The Carsons settled in Norfolk, Nebraska, where Johnny spent much of his youth after several moves. Norfolk was a conservative community with a basic lifestyle. Even though it wasn't spectacular, Carson said it offered him a sense of normalcy. Johnny was a shy boy. This child didn't make friends easily or speak up in class. He was often called bashful. Even as a child, he preferred to watch and think than converse. He was happiest alone in his room or in his fantasy. Carson found magic at 12 and altered his life. He borrowed the Golden Book of Magic from the library and was immediately hooked. Magic gave him control and amazement. He practiced and perfected it alone. He performed as the Great Carsoni for relatives and neighbors soon after. These early performances helped Carson connect with people on his own terms. He wasn't talkative in real life, but a little platform allowed him to speak, entertain, and be someone else for a few minutes. Magic helped Carson build his sense of performance and distance. On stage, he was confident, witty, and entertaining. He kept to himself off stage. He continued this pattern throughout his life. Later, many felt Carson had 2 sides: the delightful comedian millions watched on TV, and the quiet, emotionally guarded guy few knew. Carson joined U.S. forces during World War II. Navy at 17 years old. He was a Pacific-based ensign on the USS Pennsylvania. Though he never saw battle, the military gave him structure and discipline. He also learned to stay calm under pressure, which became one of his hallmarks on The Tonight Show. Carson entertained his fellow seafarers with magic tricks, another safe way to socialize. In uniform, he preferred entertaining than opening up emotionally. Carson studied at Nebraska-Lincoln after the war. He studied journalism before switching to speech and acting. He held a radio show and performed humor in college. This was his first broadcasting experience. His 1949 graduation prepared him for radio and television work. He found his calling despite his social remoteness, entertaining from a microphone or camera. Carson's mother, Ruth, shaped his emotional personality. Ruth was called frigid and critical, withholding affection by many who knew him. Carson apparently spent his entire trying to please her, but never succeeded. He stated that she never said, "I love you." This lack of affection at home may have hampered his emotional expression later in life. Early on, he learned to keep his emotions to himself and avoid emotional interactions. His personal and professional identity was shaped by this emotional wall. Carson's co-workers observed the disparity between his stage and private selves. His television persona was friendly, intelligent, and funny. He made guests feel welcome and worked a crowd. He shunned small talk off camera and often left conversations without warning. His co-workers thought he could be charming and distant. He avoided being vulnerable and rarely let anyone in. Making an American icon. After graduating from Nebraska in 1949, Johnny Carson began his broadcasting career. Like most in the profession, he started small. He began his career at Omaha's WOW radio and television. He hosted a morning show and wrote and performed comic routines there. Carson's timing and humor stood out even in his early years. People liked him immediately for his smart mind and calm demeanor. Carson left Nebraska quickly. In the early 1950s, he moved to Los Angeles to attempt television. When he started writing for TV comedian Red Skelton, his career took off. Carson performed after Skelton was wounded before a show. Industry professionals noticed his performance. This led to presenting more shows, including Earn Your Vacation and Who Do You Trust? Carson's afternoon show, where he shined with live audiences, Who Do You Trust? Carson grew into many of his notable features. He spoke naturally to guests. He listened carefully. He laughed often and looked really interested in his conversations. His wit was brilliant, but never nasty. His homemates felt he was speaking directly to them. He gained viewers' trust with his easygoing personality. Carson became famous in 1962 when NBC required a new Tonight Show host. Previous hosts had hosted the show for years, but NBC wanted someone new to keep people engaged nightly. Johnny Carson fit perfectly. He became show host on October 1, 1962, and stayed for 30 years. Carson energized late-night TV from the start, a monologue packed with current jokes about news, celebrities, and himself preceded each episode. His delivery was smooth. His timing was impeccable. Pausing or smiling at the perfect time could make a weak joke funny. He regularly made fun of failed jokes, which made audiences enjoy him more. He wasn't scared to confess failure, which made him feel authentic. Behind the scenes, Carson was far from the friendly TV host. Known for his privacy and firmly managed his show. He demanded perfection from his employees. He disliked surprises and loved order and schedule. He approved most scripts, jokes, and segments. Although many valued his expertise, others struggled to get close to him. He distinguished his public and private lives. Even longtime Carson co-workers said they didn't know him. He was nice, but distant, kind, but closed. He kept personal details and emotions to himself. Writers and producers know to talk to him briefly about work. Some who were too close were pulled away without warning. He was devoted and private, and didn't forgive quickly when deceived. Carson retired from The Tonight Show in 1992. He was one of America's most adored and respected entertainers when he left. His farewell show received 50 million viewers, demonstrating his longtime connection with people. On his last night, Carson stayed emotionally calm. Thanking his team and viewers, he smiled slightly and said goodbye. No tears, only grace and quiet. Even though his tenure as host made him famous, he was a secretive man. We'll examine Johnny's personal life and how emotional distance affected it next. Johnny Carson married Jody Merrill Wolcott in 1949, right after college. University of Nebraska was where they met. First, their relationship seemed promising. They had 3 boys, Christopher, Richard, and Corey. But issues arose early in their marriage. Carson worked long hours to become a radio and television star, which was exhausting. He was often away from home, working, and emotionally unavailable. His unfaithfulness was likewise known. The marriage ended 1963 after years of mistrust. Carson married Joanne Copeland, his second wife, months later. The couple married from 1963 till 1972. Joanne was a model and TV personality, so they looked great together. Behind the scenes, things were difficult. Joanne later remembered Carson as verbally hostile, especially after drinking. She described his fury and caustic tongue. He hurt others with words. This marriage, like his first, was plagued by emotional estrangement and infidelity. Joanne often felt forgotten as Carson focused on The Tonight Show. Carson married Joanna Holland, his third wife, in 1972. The difficulties returned after 13 years of this partnership. Carson struggled with intimacy and commitment. Even when things were well, friends said he emotionally distanced himself from his wife. He hated discussing sentiments and avoided important topics. Joanna divorced unexpectedly in 1983. Carson was astonished but didn't intervene. His divorce was discreet, and he went on. Carson's fourth and final marriage was to ex-stockbroker Alexis Moss. Marriage in 1987, they lived together until his 2005 death. Carson began slowing down professionally and spending more time at home. Alexis was a reclusive person. This may have been his most calm relationship. Even in this marriage, Carson remained alone. By then, he had mastered emotional distance and incorporated it into his personality. Carson admits to failing at relationships in interviews. "I gave more of myself to my show than any relationship," he stated. His work always came first. He didn't disregard his loved ones. He didn't know how to demonstrate. He liked routine, control, and calm. Managing troubled relationships wasn't his thing. With time, this need for control drove people away and left him more isolated. Damaged relationships. Carson had rough marriages, but fatherhood was far harder. He has Christopher, Rick, and Corey with his first wife. He struggled to connect with them from the outset. He traveled or filmed his show often. He didn't know how to discuss emotions or personal matters with his sons at home. He was sometimes chilly and aloof with them. Rick Carson was the most troublesome of the three sons. Depressive episodes and drug addiction plagued him for years. Carson rarely discussed Rick's condition, but family members said the relationship was full of missed opportunities. Rick felt abandoned by his father, and Carson didn't know how to help. They stayed emotionally distant until the end. Rick, 39, died in a vehicle accident in 1991. His car crashed off a cliff while descending a steep road. The news saddened Carson. Despite not being close, the loss hurt him. It brought up years of remorse and regret he had never addressed. Friends stated Rick's death made him more reclusive. He rarely discussed it with his other sons or close friends. Like most emotional incidents in his life, he grieved silently. A turning point came this morning privately. After Rick's death, Carson became quieter and more reclusive. His vitality waned, and he spent more time alone while working briefly following the catastrophe. Never was the same. The loss made him realize how distant he was from his family. No way could he recover from what he missed. In later years, Carson rarely referenced Rick in interviews in public. Neither mental health nor bereavement were discussed on his platform. He faded farther from public view. He had few connections by 1992 when he left The Tonight Show. Few people knew him well due to family strife. The isolation he had always wanted became permanent. Carson's personal relationship troubles weren't just background. They contributed to his final years of loneliness. The emotional walls he created to defend himself sealed him off from people who could have comforted him. His charm, wealth, and popularity took him far, but they couldn't fix domestic issues. Next, we'll examine Carson's inner struggles with alcohol, fury, and long-held grudges that isolated him further. Booze and rage. Johnny Carson was calm and personable on TV. He made people laugh and grin nightly. Carson has major personal issues off-camera. He was alcoholic, had a terrifying temper, and maintained long-standing grudges. Fame gave him success and the potential to alienate people. He utilized power often. These underlying flaws that few observed caused many of his private struggles. Workmates and friends knew Carson drank. Alcohol fueled his off-screen antics, even though he rarely drank at work. His friends say he drank to relieve stress, avoid emotive talk, get away from his sensations. He sometimes showed his darker side when he drank too much. Carson has a fast, violent temper. He may be calm one minute and furious the next. Alcohol exacerbated mood swings. He rarely displayed this side in public, but in private, he did. After their divorce, Joanne Copeland, his second wife, admitted to his unpredictability. When drunk, he roared and used terrible remarks, she said. She said he used sarcasm and caustic remarks to degrade even his friends. Behind-the-scenes stories at The Tonight Show corroborate Carson's wives' and friends' claims. He would cease talking to someone over a slight dispute, according to writers and producers. He would storm out of meetings or strike out over a bad joke, according to others. A famous story includes Carson striking a hotel wall during an altercation, demonstrating his rage. Carson was also known to be quiet when upset. He typically withdrew without discussing his feelings. This was his dispute resolution. He hated emotional interactions and couldn't digest things freely. He shut down when something hurt him, especially if it felt like a betrayal. This quiet could endure days, months, or years. He struggled to maintain friendships and love relationships due to his drinking, emotional detachment, and rage. People around him often walked on eggshells, unsure of his reaction. Even when calm, he could be chilly and distant, making others feel inferior. Eventually, more people left his life. Carson never sought public aid for these difficulties. He rarely mentioned them in interviews or admitted to issues. He preferred to appear polished. However, those who knew him well realized that these secret fights hurt him and made it hard for him to be close to anyone. Unhealing grudges. Carson's proclivity to keep grudges showed his emotional difficulties. He usually cut people out of his life who disappointed him or crossed a line. He refused second opportunities. Even with a minor disagreement, Carson would leave the relationship and never return. Friends, co-workers, and even celebrities who were close to him followed this trend. One of his most memorable fights was with Joan Rivers. As a frequent guest presenter of The Tonight Show, Rivers constantly praised Carson. He was her mentor and helped her advance professionally. The new Fox network hired Rivers to headline her own late-night show in 1986. She didn't notify Carson. He felt betrayed when he learned. His motive was loyalty. He anticipated Rivers' initial conversation. Carson was profoundly hurt and never forgave her. After the breakup, he ignored her calls. She was never asked back to The Tonight Show and never spoke to her again. Carson remained silent after Rivers' spouse died, and she openly requested peace. His inability to reconcile revealed how profoundly he could retain a grudge, even against someone he once loved. Another example was his Wayne-Newton feud. Newton thought Carson's diatribe questioned his masculinity. Newton took it seriously. He confronted Carson at his office. Some reports indicate Newton threatened him. Both men never spoke again after that day. Carson never apologized or rebuilt the connection. Carson allegedly blacklisted show guests. Richard Dawson hosted Family Feud. Carson told Dawson to leave after a fight. Public comments and formal reasons were absent. Carson's style. He softly but completely shut others off. Once he decided, it was over. These anecdotes demonstrate how Carson's reluctance to forgive shrank his world. Over time, more people left his life. Some went their own way, bored of treading on eggshells. Carson expelled others. Both methods yielded the same outcome: less community, less friends, more loneliness. This emotional solitude hurt. Carson bore these issues for years by never resolving them. Though he never mentioned them, others could feel his grief. Despite appearing indifferent, he cared. His inability to forgive left him with unhealed wounds. These feuds were scarcely mentioned in his last years. Though he buried the past, the damage was done. He no longer worked with, joked with, or trusted his former friends. Success had given him everything he wanted, but it also allowed him to isolate himself. Great disappearance. After leaving The Tonight Show in May 1992, Johnny Carson continued to work on television. He left society. Most retired celebrities do interviews, attend public events, or start new enterprises. Carson did not. He stated that his fame was over. After 30 years of nightly presence in millions of homes, the silence was almost alarming. Carson's retirement went beyond work. He closed a chapter he didn't want to relive. He declined all interviews, tributes, and chat shows. Carson declined awards and retrospectives on television. He refused to speak, record, or perform. He seemed to vanish overnight. His retirement wasn't initially expected to last. He never made a special guest appearance, despite their hopes. Over time, it became evident, said farewell with meaning. Carson lived peacefully in Malibu, California, in a Pacific Ocean view home after retirement. He was almost completely hidden. He was only seen on his yacht or on errands in town. No paparazzi images of him at huge parties or red carpet events because he didn't attend. He no longer wanted fame. Johnny Carson, 79, died on January 23, 2005. Smoking-related emphysema issues caused it. Carson had smoked on and off the air for decades. After quitting later in life, the damage was done. His death generated global news, but specifics were kept confidential. No public funeral, memorial service, or celebrity gathering honored him. A brief announcement from his family confirmed his death, and that was it. Carson planned this. He didn't want a huge exit or demonstration. After spending his final years alone, he intended to leave the world that way. Carson's acquaintances and colleagues lamented his unknown later years. The news reported his death. He hadn't been spoken to in years by others. Carson died quietly, as he had lived his last chapter. Many celebrities are remembered with memorials, performances, and fanfare. Despite his quiet, the world remembered him. Comedy, TV, and acting stars expressed their love for Carson after his death. He was called the best late-night host by David Letterman, Jay Leno, Conan O'Brien, and others. They liked his timing, knowledge, and ease. Letterman was emotional after discussing Carson, a hero and private supporter. Carson wrote jokes in retirement, an unexpected fact discovered after his death. David Letterman used several of those jokes in his opening speeches. Carson never claimed credit or announced his work. One performer gave it to another privately. Carson's passion of comedy continued after retirement. Carson donated generously to organizations, another fact that emerged after his death. He didn't mention anything, and most donations were anonymous. This modest kindness revealed his principles and character off the camera. He didn't want praise, just to help in his own way. Johnny Carson remained elusive. If you like this story, like and subscribe for more.